these are the kind of moves you should have expected. You should not be up in arms or really having much of an opinion any way, shape, or form about the moves they've made. Today, they made a trade for former Patriots, former Buccaneers guard Shaq Mason. They traded a 6th-round pick for Mason. They get a 7th with Mason in return. Something I was going to suggest. Not a big splash move, but it's definitely an improvement on your interior offensive line. Maybe he's someone you think about playing at center. These are the kind of moves that you should be expecting for a team that is nowhere close to competing. There's a lot of holes that need to be filled. And yeah, you would like to have more talented players on the roster than you saw last year. Jimmie Ward, a safety or slot corner. That's what he played last year in San Francisco. A guy who got in a fight with DeAndre Hopkins once. Chase Winovich. Nick Caserio drafted him into the 3rd round in 2019. Andrew Beck, a tight end and fullback with glorious hair. Scott Quessenberry's back in the building. Robert Woods, Mike Boone, and oh man, we might need to do an entire show on Case Keenum, who is back for another stint with the Houston Texans. That's what you should have expected. And we should just be able to move on, right? Wrong. Because I'm realizing that my approach to sports talk radio going forward might be freaking out about other people freaking out and yelling at them to calm down. I saw a headline in the Houston Chronicle. Texans dive into the free agent pool yields more ripple than splash, reads the headline. Nick Caserio finally has the cap space he's long trumpeted, but his early agreements reflect a GM still playing things conservatively. Who actually likes it when a fatty boom batty jumps into a pool and cannonballs everybody? Who actually likes it outside of 4th graders? Serious question. Who likes a cannonball? Because that article is suggesting that that's maybe the approach that they should take. I also saw a post that the ESPN 97.5 Twitter account at ESPN 97.5 posted with the fellas from the wheelhouse. Jake Asman, but specifically Cody Stutes and Brad Kellner are not thrilled with the lack of action by the Texans to this point.
When you've had the last 2 off seasons that the Texans have had, you get weary because this one has started the exact same way the last 2 free agencies have gone. So that's it. Like, this front office, mainly Nick Caserio, does not deserve the benefit of the doubt because what we've seen from him in free agency hasn't been good. Now, he didn't have a lot of resources the last 2 years. We get that. We've acknowledged that. But the hope was that, oh, man, with all of this extra cap space the Texans had, they were going to come out swinging. And so far, they're just kind of chilling.
And it's not like he's got 2 years of like, oh, look at those bargain bin players paying off for Nick Caserio. Like, It's just been something that I've been concerned about with Nick Caserio in the way that he has seemingly lost trades when they involve players, and certainly his free agency evaluation of some of these players, in addition to the players that have got to stick around with the Houston Texans. I'm unsure of his ability and his staff's ability to accurately scout players who are already in the NFL. Mm-hmm. They have not had a lot of success scouting guys that have played for other teams and bringing them in and having some success with those guys. Like they've had far more misses than successes in that category. So I do wonder if that plays like if he just has a bad grade on everybody, he doesn't want to spend any money, then like when are you spending the money and what are you spending the money on? Like,
why do you want the money to be spent? Are they new here? Are they new to watching the NFL? Serious question. And it's designed to sound condescending. Who actually wins by winning in free agency? How many times have we seen the Dolphins go on a spending spree, sign randos that don't deserve massive contracts, only for that to lead to nothing? Same thing with the Commanders. These are the two teams that were guilty of going big in free agency the most over the last 20 years. And look, I get it for both Brad and Cody. They haven't watched a great team growing up. They haven't. traditionally great teams aren't going to be winning Super Bowls by making move after move in free agency. And you have to look at it through this prism. Forget about the scouting side of things. I would like some examples on the trades that have been disastrous for the Houston Texans in terms of trading for a veteran player. You take flyers on guys who you think you can get help from, that you know, that you are familiar with. And if they don't work out, it's not the end of the world, because the situation the Texans have been in since Caserio came in has been one of trying to figure out what the hell they're doing next. Rebuilding. 2019, you get out of that season, you get into 2020, 2021, 2022. It's been a bleeping disaster since then. Is that going to be fixed by throwing money the way that right now the Chicago Bears are throwing money? And the Bears have thrown a lot of money around. People are wondering, well, why didn't the Texans go after somebody like former Bills linebacker Tremaine Edmunds? 4 years, $72 million deal, $50 million guaranteed. They signed linebacker TJ Edwards from Philadelphia, guard Nate Davis, defensive end DeMarcus Walker. They've signed a lot of guys. They've spent a lot of money. They also had twice the cap space of the Houston Texans going into this offseason. I'm just trying to figure out if they wanted that. Do you want to do what the previous regime loved doing? Sign linebackers to big extensions like Bernardrick McKinney, like Zach Cunningham. How did those two contracts work out? We're talking middle linebacker here. The Bears are signing a guy in Tremaine Edmunds who literally is a worse version of the guy that they already had, Roquan Smith, who they traded to Baltimore instead of paying. But I'm assuming that because the Texans have not done a lot to this point in free agency, that's what both Cody and BK are looking for. It starts off slow. Yeah, it does start off slow generally when a team's one of the worst in the NFL the year before. I don't understand why we shouldn't give Nick any benefit of the doubt because of the way that this organization has been in free agency. Are you expecting things to be different? Why do you need a splash? Are you 5? Do you need to be distracted by some big, wonderful move at this point in the year? No, you don't, because you knew where this team was going, which is not anywhere anytime soon. And that's not going to be changed by making a big signing. By the way, you have to convince the guys that you signed the big contracts with to actually want to play for a team that is definitely far away from contention. And while I think they should extend Laramie Tunsil, that's the only person I'm thinking about out there that is really worthy of a contract. I joked about Lamar Jackson. It would be fun to bring in Lamar Jackson. It sure would be. It would give this team a lot more relevance, but that's not going to bring the Texans back into contention. You need to come out swinging. You can't shop in the bargain bin. No, that's the only way you should be approaching it in free agency. What matters this offseason is what Nick Caserio does in the draft. That is really it as far as the big picture of this organization. And then you bring in guys to fill out the roster. You are not in a position right now where you should be spending big in free agency. And we are also in a spot where this is not something we should be freaking out about. I feel like we should have learned something by now. Anyone who follows the NFL should know that going big in free agency is not the approach to winning a Super Bowl unless you are close. The finishing pieces, okay, fine. Do what the Rams did. Look what the Rams are now. If the Texans pulled a Rams from a couple of years ago, are they going to be in the Super Bowl? No. This impatience, I don't get it. You have to be patient with this team. You have to be somewhat patient with the Rockets too, and you want to be seeing development along the way. But I don't get frustration, criticism, or whining about Caserio right now. I just don't. I don't have the energy for it. And a texter brings up a very good point at 713-780-3776. This one comes from the 936. The Texans signed Noah Brown, best blocking wide receiver core in the league. Sean Mapes is chuckling at that text. What's wrong with that?
No, it's true, but it's a funny claim to fame.
Look, Noah Brown's a good receiver. He's a good receiver. He's not great, but he's good.
Both Robert Woods and Noah Brown are like a good 2-3 on most teams.
Yeah. And by the way, you did not have that last year. Nico Collins was your number 2, and Nico Collins leaves some to be desired. Big body. There's something that can be worked with there, but yeah, you do have really good blocking wide receivers. Robert Woods is willing to do it. Nico Collins is a big dude.
This is like the normal brain getting receivers to help your quarterback, galaxy brain getting receivers to help your running back.
Look, you brought in Bobby Slowick from the San Francisco 49ers. You're going to be running the football a lot. So get ready for a lot of Mike Boone. Also Damian Pierce, but mostly Mike Boone and Rex Burkhead.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're forgetting someone.
Wide receivers blocking downfield too. And look, the offensive line, it's important. It's something that you need to invest in. And the Texans invested in the offensive line today. They traded for Shaquille Mason. And he might not be the player that he used to be a couple of years ago, but that's a good move. 6th-round pick for a guy who's proven he can do it. It's better than A.J. Cann at right guard. Or maybe he goes to left guard. Maybe you try to figure out what to do with Kenyon Green coming off his surgery. That is an upgrade. You got Jimmie Ward at safety. Maybe he's going to be your nickel corner. Maybe Jalen Petrie continues to play up in the box, and Ward is someone you put back there with Jonathan Owens. I'm not 100% sure what they're going to do at safety, but Jimmie Ward has been a capable player. Also, he beat up DeAndre Hopkins in that fight that happened at Texans training camp practice back in 2018. I actually have the probably best video on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Paul Gallant, of the fight between DeAndre Hopkins and Jimmie Ward. You can also check out, show clips after the show. But hey, the more important thing here is that the Texans, while not making big splashes, are doing things. And I don't think that we should be stressing about the lack of big things. And if you are going to freak out about a lack of splashes, you got to give me specific names. And you got to explain to me why it would make sense to spend a lot of money on a specific player. I'd love to have a better defensive line. Hassan Ridgeway is not nearly enough. I'd love to have better linebackers. Christian Harris is not nearly enough. There's a lot of things this team needs to add. The best things to add, like a Javon Hargraves, who just signed a big deal over the past 24 hours. A deal like that, it's cool, but you're not here to win headlines right now. And it feels like all of a sudden we've gone back into a spot where, because the Texans have some cap space, you want them to go crazy. They're going to have more cap space next offseason. And I think that they should allow themselves to have that massive amount of cap space next offseason. And okay, maybe that's the year with a rookie quarterback on the second year of his rookie contract where you've got, I think from the looks of things, something like $80 million in space to work with, which I would imagine would change after you give Laramie Tunsil an extension. That's when you decide to be super aggressive. I don't get why people need to have it now. I'm pointing at the wheelhouse. I am pointing at the implication that was made by the Houston Chronicle with that headline that they put out there that seemed to lament the fact that the Texans haven't made a big splash. And it's headline writers, and headline writers know what they're doing. They're trying to get people to click on things that they'll likely be angry about. Texans dive into free agent pool, wrote the headline, yields more ripple than splash. Nick Caserio finally has the cap space he's long trumpeted, but his early agreements reflect a GM still playing things conservatively. Why would you play things aggressively if you're Nick Caserio? You clearly have job security now that you've hired D'Amico Ryans, and it seems like the two of them get along. I imagine they will have at the very least 2 years to work with one another. We'll see what happens after that. Once you have 3 years of film, actually check that. Once you have, I think, multiple years of film on the first two real draft classes that Nick Caserio has, that is when you can finally, I think, decide whether or not it's worked out. I feel like they're going to have 2 years to work together, and it might not work out. But whether or not it works out is not going to be determined by the moves that they don't make right now. And what? You missed out on Tremaine Edmonds? Are you mad about that? Or Javon Hargraves? Or the guy in Jacksonville who just signed the deal with Kansas City? The offensive tackle, whose name's eluding me right now?
Juwan Taylor.
Thank you, Sean. That's not something you need at tackle, by the way. That's what I'm kind of perplexed by. I don't get why all of a sudden we're impatient.
Do you think that it's partially due to the hire of D'Amico Ryans being such a splash home run press conference winning high that Texans fans and Texans media is still coming off of after walking in the desert for two and a half years with like absolutely nothing to get excited about, and then boom, D'Amico Ryans, and now they have cap space. We're fiending for another excitement bump.
You're still in the desert. You stumbled across an oasis. You got tons of water right now. You're still going through the desert, but you got water. That gives you hope that you can actually make it all the way through the desert.
I don't think I can make it to April 28th or whenever the draft is.
Tough it up.
Ugh.
Tough it up. I don't think I can either because everyone's an extreme thing. I don't want to beat up a straw man, but there's enough people that are frustrated with this like lack of movement, and I'm just asking them, what were you expecting? Like, what did you think was going to happen? Did you really think that the Texans were going to go out of their way to sign the biggest free agents out there?
I'm just saying, take a meeting with Aaron Rodgers. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I'm sure Aaron Rodgers wants to come here. There's two sides to a deal. People would have to want to come here, and I don't think a lot of people want to be around for a rebuild. Brandon Cooks sure doesn't. Cooks is at the very least honest about it, even if he has been annoying, whether on Twitter or just with the way that he handled last year, not getting traded at the trade deadline despite signing a contract voluntarily that makes him practically immovable, at least in terms of things that Nick Caserio could get of value in return. You're probably going to get like a 4th or a 5th round pick, best case scenario for Brandon Cooks. That's what it feels like right now. 1-year deal. It's not a very affordable 1-year deal. Anyway, I just don't get what you guys wanted. I don't get what you're so upset about. Those who are impatient right now about what the Texans aren't doing in free agency. You knew this was coming. Were you going to be mad if they did make big splash acquisitions? I would have been. Would you have been mad? Were you going to be mad at them no matter what they did? And there are a lot of you out there that would do that. There are lots of you out there. You're still mad that they won the last game of the year and had the number 2 overall draft pick. I can understand to an extent why some people were mad about that, but some of you guys are still on that. And I'm like, okay, it happened. They have to adapt to it. I suppose you can hold that against them, but you don't know whether or not the number 2 overall pick in this year's draft class is actually going to be the position of power. I think all the pressure's on the Panthers right now. That is one way to spin zone it in your mind, that's for sure. But let's stop getting outraged about a lack of action in free agency. This team is not that close, and free agency is not where you win Super Bowls. The NFL offseason cycle of news has lent itself to this time of year being very discussed. It's not quite NBA free agency and offseason and trades, but yeah, it's a fun time of year, but the fun does not translate to success in the same way it does on the basketball side of things. It just doesn't.